Bowl game transfer buzz and a whole lot more. We got the godfather of Iowa media, Tom Kakert, on the beat. He's joining us from Nashville today. Locked on Hawkeye.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent, Condon, joined today by Tom Kakert, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube. While you're there, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, my guest today, Tom Kakert from Hawkeye Report. He's been known to dabble a little bit, and I'm sure he's got some accounts open. You're in Tennessee, though, for the bowl game, and I believe, yes, wagering is available there in the state of Tennessee, so you're good to go.
I was on the FanDuel app today,
Nice.
wagering away. So
Yes.
a plug for the sponsor. Love
Yeah.
FanDuel. And I looked at their, you know what they did? This is really cool. They sent out a wrap, like the Spotify wrap,
Mhm.
like your gambling wrap today. So I got to look back at all the money that I lost this year.
Same. I did the exact same email, and I was looking through, and there were a few big hits. So my favorite thing, I use the FanDuel app a lot for the futures. They have such a wide menu. That's the reason that I'm on there a whole lot. I did hit one because they had the 7.5 for the Iowa.
For Iowa Hawkeyes.
Yes.
Yes, I hit that one this year. Yeah, I hit a couple. It's a great app. It's very easy, and I love it because they get a lot of the college football stuff up really early.
Mhm.
Earlier than just about anybody these days, and yeah, it's great. Love FanDuel.
Well, look at that. We start off with a plug, and we didn't even plan on talking a plug, but it
No,
stepped into it.
because we're degenerates.
Well,
Because we're degenerates.
there's no doubt about that. And
Yes.
for people that are heading to the bowl game, now you know, you want to
Yeah,
dabble,
you can bet. You can bet in Tennessee.
you can bet in
Got
Tennessee. You're
everything.
good to go. Well, let's talk a little bit about the bowl game. You've been there the last couple of days, and I
Yep.
think the biggest, probably top of fold topic is the quarterbacks that aren't going to play, but the quarterbacks that are there. Hank Brown, the Auburn transfer, he's
Yep.
going through things, and also the incoming freshman, Jimmy Sullivan. Boy, listening to you and Chad Leistico talk on the podcast this morning, hear you guys talk a little bit about it. Some of the people that I've talked to, Jimmy Sullivan, I think there's a segment of the fan base that, well, it's another quarterback that was recruited by Brian. He was committed. Well, it's just another guy. And after the disappointment of the young quarterbacks the last 4 or 5 years, I think people have already kind of written off Jimmy Sullivan, but there's some buzz with this young guy and plenty of arm talent.
Yeah. So I was talking to Tyler Barnes. I guess he's the CFO now, or CEO, or whatever his title is. Chief of Staff, I think, is the official title. After signing day, about Jimmy Sullivan, and he got the Tim Lester stamp of approval. Tim went out there, and it was a terrible weather day. It was rainy and windy and everything. And they could have easily just said, you know what, I'm not going to go out and throw this. And he just went out and he was ripping it in the wet footballs, and just lot of good things to say about him. And they could have very easily Tim Lester could have went there and said, you know what, don't like him, don't think he's any good, and let's just go in a different direction. And he loves him, just absolutely over the moon about this kid, and just thrilled that he gets to work with him this spring. It's pretty amazing what Tim's done in less than a calendar year in terms of just the extreme makeover of that quarterback room with and Jimmy Sullivan. I mean, it would not shock me if he's the backup quarterback going into the start of next year.
Oh,
Depends on how he develops. I mean, I'm really putting carts before horses here.
yeah.
But if it happened, I wouldn't go, wow, I can't believe that happened. I'd be like, yeah, I could see that. Just because they like what he does. And it's got an interesting throwing motion. It's not like a pure like quarterback. It's more like he's throwing a baseball.
Okay.
But But he's got some velo on it, and he seems pretty accurate. We haven't really gotten to see him, but moves pretty well. I just got a funny feeling about this kid that there's something good here, and that Tim Lester really likes him. Just tells me a lot about his potential.
Let's go to Hank Brown. The Auburn
Yeah.
transfer started a couple of games, went well against New Mexico, not so much
Mhm.
Arkansas, threw the 3 interceptions in that one. But this a
Yep.
lot of buzz, good size, 6'4". He can sling it himself, good arm talent coming in. So you kind of go with those components. And Brendan Sullivan, he's a great runner. I don't know
Yep.
what
Yep.
kind of full quarterback that he is. Jackson Stratton, a nice story. Probably not the guy you want starting to begin next season. So do you give Hank Brown a realistic chance to come in here and win this job over Brendan Sullivan?
I do. I know there's been some that have kind of dismissed it and said, Sully's the starter. And if Sullivan starts next year, would not surprise me at all. He's probably, if we're doing gambling odds, he's the betting favorite right
Mhm.
now he's probably minus 200 to be the starting quarterback for Iowa. But Hank Brown's probably like, even money or, plus 150 plus 200 to be the starting quarterback. He started for an SEC team, 2 games. You might not say, "Well, that's not very much," and he didn't do well against Arkansas. All those things are true, but he started for an SEC team, and not just like an also ran an Auburn team. So he's a big kid. Just kind of standing around him at practice. I mean, he's not Nate Stanley big, but he
Mhm.
kind of reminds you of Nate Stanley. But he's more mobile, I think. Big arm, good arm talent, work ethic is there. Really great kid. Luke Lachey was singing his praises. He moved in with Luke uh, when he came to Iowa City. I think he said December 18th. Luke's girlfriend moved out, not because they broke up. She was just moving home. He had to clarify that. He's like, yeah, no, she didn't break up with me. She was just moving home because she was graduated and just getting out of there. And Hank moved in where Luke is living and he's just like, guys is great. He's just really nice guy to be around. And um, yeah, so I think he's got a chance, depending on how quickly he picks up the offense. But the fact that both those guys have been able to come in and they're going to be able to get those reps. I think it's interesting. Hank's going to be headed out now after before the bowl game because they got a family vacation that they were going to go on already, and he couldn't play in the game anyway. So it's
Right.
just like why why not just go do the family thing and spend time with your family while you can. But I think he's putting in the work, and I think he's got a lot of talent, and I think he's going to be a contender for that starting job.
One more on quarterbacks. We got portal buzz to get into. We
Yep.
got obviously the matchup against Missouri, and I want to talk a little
Yep.
basketball. So we got a lot on the docket here. One
Yep.
more with quarterbacks, though. Doesn't it make sense in this game on Monday against Missouri just to let Brendan Sullivan sling it? I mean, let him throw it
Yep.
25, 30 times and not, yes, you want to win the game. I get that, but it's more important to know, can Brendan Sullivan be your starter next year? Can you really count on him? Because we
Yep.
saw the UCLA game. 2 throws you can't make, late across the middle. What is number 1? Look, I was a quarterback in junior high. I was terrible. But one thing I knew, don't be late, don't throw it over the middle. He did it twice. This is a guy that's 21 years old and it did it twice in his first start at Iowa. Don't you have to do that in this game? See if Sullivan can do it, not with his legs, but if he can do it with his arm.
Yeah. Chad Lysico and I were talking about that. Just like, boy, these bowl games are glorified exhibitions. Yeah, you want to win. You do. I absolutely do because your program feels different after a bowl win going into the winter than it does if you get drubbed in a game like last year. It just didn't feel as good for Iowa football going into the offseason. Your fans feel a little bit better about things. They don't have a bad taste in their mouth. But I want to see, and I think Tim Lester wants to let it rip too. I really do. And you have a good excuse not to just let it kind of rip because Caleb Johnson's gone. You don't have to the horse to feed, the thoroughbred. You don't have that. So why not just throw it 40 times, see what happens, and just kind of that I'll guarantee you Mizzou would be surprised if I was just in shotgun the whole game, and just slinging it, and it'll be kind of fun. Who
Yeah.
knows? Maybe it might luck into something. You're number 130 out of 133 and throwing the football this year in the NCAA. Well, the offense has gotten better. The passing game still is stunted growth. So good opportunity to let it grow a little bit.
And with that, we're going to talk a little bit about the portal. Iowa's still searching for options there. We'll get into
Yeah.
that with Tom Kakert from Hawkeye Report. We continue. This is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about that you were paying for twice? Well, it happened with me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow savings. It brings everything together all in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or goals that you want to hit for this upcoming year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Trent Condon alongside Tom Kakert back with you once again on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Special edition, Tom joining us from Nashville. Appreciate your time here today, Tom. And,
Yes.
well, Hawkeye Report. So people go there. They know that so much of what you guys do with On3 is the recruiting part of things. And with it, recruiting is morphed into portal season. I see it on the podcast side. I see it on the radio side. You talk portal, and people's ears definitely perk up. Iowa's only got 2 so far. Hank Brown that we talked about, Jonah Pace, a defensive lineman, defensive tackle. They needed that, but it feels like Iowa is lagging behind. Is that a fair narrative that is out there right now, that Iowa is struggling a little bit in this portal season?
Yes and no. I don't know that I would call it lagging. It's very different than, like, somebody said to me the other day, how come Iowa's not as busy in the portal as Wisconsin and Nebraska? Well, both those programs lost like 20 guys in the last 2 weeks. So they have a different sense of urgency, and they can sell things differently as well, which is, the portal guys in the portal are looking for, some guys are looking for paychecks, but they're also looking for opportunity and a spot that's going to be open to them to be able to play right away. And Iowa might not offer that as much, but I do think they still struggle at the wide receiver position. They've definitely tried, they got Hank Brown, but they tried to get Bo Prabula from Penn State for sure. And they had the best offer, and it was more that he didn't, the offense didn't seem to fit him as well. And so he ends up at Missouri, who ironically Iowa's playing this week, which is kind of just fascinating that they were going head to head for a couple. They were both involved with Miller Moss early, so they were kind of shopping in the same stores for quarterbacks this year. I think they'd like to get another defensive tackle, get some more depth there, experience. But beyond that, I think it's kind of luxury items. Would they like to get a corner? Probably. I think once we get past the first of the year, there's still so many guys in the portal, but it's just about finding the right guy, the right fit, the right player. If the South Dakota State quarterback goes in the portal, that might be an interesting guy, because I don't think Iowa is saying they're closed off, because I think they got like 5-6 scholarships. I have to look at our scholarship distribution. So they've got some spots. I thought one thing that was interesting today, we spoke with Caden Weegan, and he's coming back. I said he's 98% sure he's coming back, which I thought was a wildly specific number that he shared. So, um, but I asked him if he was on scholarship yet. Now, remind you, this is an All-American kick returner. He won All-American honors. He was the Big Ten kick returner, punt returner of the year. So you would think he'd be on scholarship by now, right? He's not, at
Mm,
least as of this moment. So I just thought that was very interesting that he's not on scholarship. And he may have, by the way, because of the Diego Pavia
hmm
decision, Regent may have 2 years left. But then he said, I don't want to play college football when I'm 35. He was joking. He'd be 35, so he was joking. He made a joke about it. But uh, I think he wants to play one more year. Um, why not put him on scholarship?
Yeah.
You got one. And he's certainly proved his worth and value. But I think wide receiver is a spot. They went after an offensive lineman, but I think it was just a case of where the guy was so good and he was interested that you just got to kind of throw the line over the water and see if you can get him. But I think after the first year, we'll see Iowa engage again with some prospects.
Makes a lot of sense, and there's still the spring window on top of it. I
Yep.
think another thing that helps is Iowa starts their spring semester later than a lot of other universities, so it doesn't have to be quite the hurry that it is
Yeah.
that some places that start there, in the second week of January. That's not the case at the
Yep.
University of Iowa, so it gives them maybe a little bit more leeway, and there's going to be more people that can still enter in. It's also a dead period right now, right? And I think people
Yes.
forget that part of it.
Yeah. You can't do anything until after January 1.
Yeah.
So once that hits, then the dead period's out, and I think you're going to see more activity. Right now, everybody's kind of taking a deep breath, and I don't know how coaches do it in December when you've got signing a class, getting ready for a bowl game, and balancing the portal. That's a lot. It's just a lot. It's kind of silly, but the way the calendars work in college on the academic side, this is the only way it can work
Mhm.
because guys want to get somewhere for the second semester. And as long as the second semester is going to be in mid to late January, guys are going to want to hit the portal now and try and find destinations quickly.
One more on the portal. Tom Kakert, Hawkeye Report, joining us here today on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. And you have a really good relationship with Brad Heinrichs with the Swarm
Sure.
Collect. You know him well. I've interviewed Brad a couple of times, got to know him a little bit, and I had a cocktail with him, well, beer with him, and I had a Swarm beer. He's a really good guy.
Yeah.
But there's this narrative, another one of those narratives that I don't think is true. Now, this is again reading between lines and reading things. Look, I was not Ohio State as it pertains. They're not Texas A&M,
No.
but I was not struggling at the level that every time they miss a recruit, well, the other team just had more money. The Swarm doesn't have enough. This narrative, I think, is pretty wrong, right? When you look at their brethren, when you look at them in comparison to, like, they're after the wide receiver, the Virginia Tech's after, and the NC States, and the Minnesotas, and the Illinois of the world, I was fine financially in NIL, aren't they?
Uh-huh.
Or am I off on
They're,
this
no, they're okay.
one? Mhm.
Could it be better? I think Brad would be the first person to tell you that it could be a lot better.
He wants it to be a
Uh,
lot better.
Yeah, and that makes just things easier. One of the things that's going to change everything pretty dramatically, I think, happens in August, is when the House settlement money starts being distributed every year to current college athletes along with former college athletes. So I think once that begins, then you've got, the Iowa football program is probably going to get about between 14 and $15 million to distribute every year moving forward, as long as we're adhering to this House case. Out of that, and the House distribution of media rights money this year, this coming year, is going to, I think, be about $20.5 million, and football is going to get probably around 14 of that. So they will be able to take care of a lot of guys that way. But that's going to be Tyler Barnes's job to kind of be a capologist, almost like an NFL team, and try and figure out how he distributes that. that money to the various players. And there's going to be some players that get more than others. And that's just how this is going to work. But you're also going to be able to take care of some of your, they've cut the number of walk-ons down. But I could see a situation where you're going to have those 20 walk-ons to get to the 105. You're going to have 85 scholarships. Maybe you're paying for the tuition of all those walk-ons, which is almost like a scholarship, just basically another way of doing that, especially for those in-state kids. Maybe you're giving them enough money that it covers their tuition if they would like to use it that way.
Makes a lot of sense. I know, talking to a couple of walk-on families, the conversations that were had, it was difficult for Kirk Ferentz.
It was
And
tough,
I
really
talked to
tough.
two different families that they don't have room for. And both of them said that Kirk, with both of the conversations with the kids, started tearing up. This is a backbone of Iowa football, and it has to go away because of this. This is one part of it. I understand the idea of going to 105 in the roster cap, but boy, shouldn't they dwindle down? Because Iowa goes from 130 kids to 105. You're talking about a lot of kids that would have played for the Hawkeyes that won't get that opportunity.
Yep. And we talked to one of them today who, if the 105 might have been around, Quinn Schulte, we talked to today, might not have been part of that 105. And look at him. He's a, multiple year starter. He's going to be chasing the NFL here after the bowl game. But, he may not be with the team. Initially, he may not have made the cut because they might have had another walk-on safety, and you probably can't afford to have two of them on your roster. And so it's gonna, Caden Weegan, he may have been a guy that doesn't get on their radar, or I think back to like a Nick Easley, who's another walk-on kid, wide receiver. There's all these stories of walk-ons that have done so well in the Iowa football program that under this new cap in terms of players, they may not have been on the roster. And there was some tough. I mean, my friend Rusty Van Wetziga, with his guys in my area, and Rusty, thankfully. He had an opportunity at Northern Illinois. Now he's going to end up going to Central Michigan, and that's cool that he's going to get that opportunity. But he wanted to be out. Here's a tough conversation. They sign Joey Van Wetziga, Rusty the Fourth's brother, and then later that day, younger Rusty the Fourth gets called into Kirk's office and told that they're going to have to move on from him. And talk about a tough day for that family. I mean, but that's the way this business is going to be for the short term.
With that, we're going to talk a little hoops and make our picks for the bowl game. We'll come back here. Okay. We continue. Locked On Hawkeyes. We got Tom Kakert with us from HawkeyeReport.com. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are here, but it's not too late to get down in the regular season action with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on which players are going to score a touchdown. You can do team totals for all kinds of teams, the NFL, college football. Maybe you're taking a look at Iowa. They got you covered there as well. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Back with you one final time. Locked On Hawkeyes, Trent Condon, Tom Kakert joining me from Nashville. Bowl destination, Nashville, great place, drivable. You made it from the Quad Cities in 8 hours? Yeah. A lot of people that are making their way here on Friday throughout the weekend, getting over there, maybe spending New Year's Eve there, staying a little bit after. So great destination. It's drivable. That's a good one. What do you expect in terms of numbers? In terms of Iowa fans, it's not what bowl games once were. 10,000, is that a realistic number?
Yeah, I think so. I think there'll be a good amount of Iowa fans at the game, and I think people just like coming to Nashville. Yeah. You get some good music. It's a good place to drink some beer.
Yep.
I have a good time. It's hard not to have a good time down in that Broadway district, and I'm up by the Midtown area, and that's great restaurants, and find some good places to eat and have a couple cold ones. There's nothing better than that for an Iowa fan.
Yes, that's it sounds like Nirvana. Wish I was there. I'm extremely jealous. Now, here's one thing. I I saw Blair Sanderson, who also helps you over at Hawkeye
Yeah.
Report. He had the post the other day talking about Iowa, their last 8 matchups against against
Mhm.
ranked teams, and it has not gone very well. I continue to come back. I don't know how Iowa scores in this game. I don't know how they're going to put points up, and that's
Yeah.
why I could see this thing being 21-10, 24-7, something like that, where I would just can't get enough offense going. That's kind of how I see it. How do you see it coming on Monday?
I picked, Chad asked me for a prediction last night on his pod, and I said 20-17, Missouri. And I just think having that experienced quarterback, and you're just going to feel that void of, we're going to find out if it was the Iowa offensive line or if it was Caleb Johnson that made magic happen. And I think it's one or the other. I don't think it's a little of both. And I wonder if it was more KJ that was the guy that just had otherworldly um, performances. But you know what? This is an opportunity for. I was the guy singing Kamari Moulton's praises before the
Yes.
season a lot, and thought he would be the guy that emerged this year, and that didn't happen. Not to the level that I thought it would. But he busted a big run against Maryland, so maybe he'll hit a couple big plays. But that's why I kind of want him to just throw the ball around the yard,
Yeah.
just see what happens. And I think that, and I think Tim Lester would be more than happy to do that. So we'll see if it happens.
Let's talk little hoops before we finish
Sure,
up. Seydou Traore, he is good to go in the Monday
good to
matchup, the
go.
last conference game. That's big news because, Tom, I maintained all this year watching this team, and when Traore's been out there, the addition of Drew Thelwell, how good. And I know you're a Quad City guy, so you have to love Brock Harding. I'm shocked of how much he has improved this year and
Mhm.
how okay he is on the defensive end of the floor. I mentioned earlier, he's third right now in defensive efficiency individually on this team. He's the third best on the squad. If you would have told me that Brock Harding was going to do that in his sophomore campaign, I would have called you crazy. There seems like there's something more with this team, but the athleticism of Thelwell and Traore, I think, are a big part of that.
Yeah, I do too. Just two terrific pickups by Fran McCaffery. You have to give him credit for going in the portal and finding a couple of players that could really help them at key positions. And here's the thing and talked to Fran earlier today on a Zoom, and I asked him about Traore coming back, and then we got to talking about just the overall health of the team. And he's like, yeah, this will be one of the first games where we feel like we're really fully healthy because they've had guys that have just, Peyton's been banged up, and um, Owen Freeman's was dealing with a foot thing early in the year, and you've had Traore dealing with the ankle. You've had Cooper Koch out of the lineup. Now all these guys, all these pieces are healthy, and I'm really intrigued with what they could do in the Big Ten Conference as a healthy team, because if they can shoot the ball well, I didn't even mention Josh Dix is
Mhm.
playing with a bad wrist, after the Washington State game. So if they can, and Joe Lenardi's of the world and guys like that have Iowa just kind of right on the bubble.
Mhm.
So there's but here's the thing, when I look at Iowa's schedule, like the early Big Ten, they got to make some hay early in the Big Ten,
You-
because that back 8 games, 6 to 8 games in the Big Ten, holy cow. I think 5 of their last 8 are on the road, and there's
uh,
some tough road games and there's some tough home games in there. So they have got to kind of build something early in the Big Ten, and to, I think, give them some security that they could get into the NCAA tournament this year.
There are 7 Big Ten games to begin after we get obviously past this
Yep.
New Hampshire game. at Wisconsin, home for Nebraska, Indiana, the LA road trip to USC, UCLA, and then back home for Minnesota and Penn State. Boy, it feels like if you're 5-2, obviously you're in great shape, but you have to have a winning record coming through that
Yep.
because
Yep.
I've mentioned it a couple of times here, Tom, that closing stretch is incredibly difficult. Your only home game you get over the last 4 is against Michigan State. You go to
Yep.
Illinois, to Northwestern, home for Michigan State, to Nebraska. It's been a house of horrors. That is
House of
incredibly
horrors.
difficult for them to
Yep.
wrap up. So I'm right there with you. Need to get it done. It needs to start. And can we win one in the Kohl Center? How about that? Let's start that next Friday. Let's get a win in the
That would
Kohl
be
Center to get Big Ten play really started in January.
That's exactly what they need to do because that Wisconsin team is totally beatable too.
Yes.
And they
You
just
and I beat
are.
them in the secret exhibition.
Yes, they're not that good. So I think that's a winnable game. And yeah, and when you talked about having a winning record, it's got to be better than 4-3 out of that first 7. It just does.
Yeah.
And it was super important that they got a win out of those first 2 because there's so many years where they've started 0-2, and that's just I don't care what it feels like it's 0-20. It just feels like you're digging out of that hole. Even a couple of years, was it last year they started 0-3? I think.
Yes.
Yeah, it was just rough. I mean, you can't. I haven't seen an Iowa team like start fast for a bit, and I think they need to do that this year.
Yeah, I think before this year, Fran was 2-12 in those early Big Ten games in his
Ugh.
career, including losing to the worst Wisconsin team in a quarter century, losing to last year's Michigan team that went 3-17 in the Big Ten. It wasn't just that they were losing games; they were losing games that they shouldn't, and that really put them behind the 8 ball. So you got the split, almost got the win against Michigan, but feel better about it. But Tom, gonna be fun, and you'll be watching from Nashville as you will be there and making your way back
Yeah.
after that one with basketball. Hey, appreciate the time, Tom. We are out of it here today. Always love talking Hawkeye sports with you. People want to check you out, HawkeyeReport.com. It's part of On3 and portal season upon us. Great time if you want to get involved over at On3 and Hawkeye Report. Tell people how they can jump aboard and what you all have going on right now.
Yeah, just stop by HawkeyeReport.com. Easy to subscribe. First 7 days are free, and we're going to give you great coverage every day. That's why I'm on the road, and Kyle Huseman's killing it with the women's basketball coverage, and Blair kills it with football recruiting. We've got Tanner Lefevre is just doing a tremendous job covering Iowa men's and women's wrestling too. So going to be super busy. And encourage everybody to stop by and visit the site.
That's awesome. Tom Kakert, HawkeyeReport.com. Tom, we will talk to you again soon. We'll talk to you next week on the radio side of things.
Yes.
Schedule's got a little bit off, and we do that each and every Friday. And sometimes give a little bonus content over the weekend here. People get to hear you on the podcast as well. Hey, appreciate it, Tom. You also have a podcast for all the podcast listeners. People can check that out at Hawkeye Report. Thank you, Tom.
Yep. Thanks, Trent.
Thanks for being with us, and thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We'll talk to you again on Monday. Go Hawks.